My name is Patrick Doyle, reporting with the Daily Aztec. I'm sitting here with businessman, tech entrepreneur, and congressional for California's 52nd District, Mr. Jim DeBello. Mr. Jim DeBello, thank you so much for being here.
Hi, Patrick. Nice to be with you and everyone else listening.
All right, I want to start with the economy. On your website, you talk about the importance of a balanced budget and a decreased deficit, but don't actually lay out your specific plans for doing just that. So what is your plan to keep the economy strong while also reducing the deficit?
That's a good question, Patrick. I'm a tech entrepreneur. I've run companies. I've started companies. In fact, I'm maybe better known for being the co-inventor of mobile check deposit. That's a product that you take a photograph of a check and put it in your bank account instantly. And I've never seen a product with such strong positives. Consumers absolutely love it. It means one less trip to the bank and waiting in the queue. Banks love it too, because obviously it's more efficient for them. And under the COVID conditions, the stay-at-home orders, this really has been amplified at the utility of that product. So I'm very proud of that. We have 2,600 banks that use the product nationally, all the big ones, B of A, Wells, Chase, and of course, 80 million Americans, not to mention international. So it's really a terrific product. But I left my company to do this race. I wanted to get into the arena, as Teddy Roosevelt once said, to try to provide solutions to where I thought this country was going in the wrong direction. And one of them is the deficit. This deficit has grown materially over the past decade, and especially with the recent conditions of the COVID programs that we have enacted. Necessarily, but nonetheless, it's a deep, deep hole. We'll probably approach the $30 trillion deficit shortly. Now, I am running in the 52nd Congressional District. To me, it is a high-tech corridor of San Diego. It is 50% of the GDP in San Diego, represented by companies ranging from Qualcomm in telecommunications, where I once worked, to life science and biotech companies, and of course, the principal home port of the Pacific Fleet, right? So it's a very important military district too. It begins in Coronado. We cover Point Loma in the district, La Jolla, all the way out through Mira Mesa, Tierra Santa, Poway, and a bit of Rancho Bernardo. So it's a very big district with over 400,000 voters. Okay.
Absolutely.
And typically these folks in this district are hardworking individuals, small businesses, hospitality included, and they are concerned about this continuing depression that we've actually built ourselves into. And I use those words because we saw the economic data yesterday, 39% decrease, I believe, quarter over quarter, just a phenomenal meltdown, enacted in order to protect us, but requiring us to enact more deficit spending and an urgency to open up and get businesses back on their feet.
So do you think there's a way to both keep people safe while also reducing the deficit?
Well, this is not going to happen in the short term. This is a long-term effort now, right? I mean, when my opponent, Scott Peters, first took office 8 years ago, the deficit was 16 trillion. As of pre-COVID, it was 21 trillion. And now we're going to approach another 5 trillion or something like that. 3 trillion in the first program, and a debate going on in Washington as we speak. This is not going to go away soon. We need to obviously support those who have been forced to be unemployed through state unemployment benefits. And we can't sustain the high rate of unemployment supplement that we have, because it obviously is sending us further into deficit. And frankly, it's an incentive not to work. And that's just the opposite of what we need. I've talked to many small business owners who say they're having difficulty bringing employees back, who make the very honest calculation. I make more staying at home than I do working, as a bartender or as a chef or in other aspects of the hospitality business. So I'm not going back, and until those benefits run out. People, you say this in business, Patrick, you follow the money, and incentives are what it's all at. And if we incent people not to work, it's not a good thing for getting the tax payrolls rebuilt, right? Number one. Number two is, and I don't mean to ramble on, but this is very important to me as well, is that part of that employment picture to drive revenue for our IRS and state tax agencies through hardworking Americans. Part of that is redeploying people who are going to be out of business for a long time. And I worry about this a lot. The hospitality business is decimated. The transportation business is decimated. You see the layoffs that are becoming, they were furloughs, meaning temporary, now they're becoming permanent. We're not going to crawl out of this for a long time. I have a classmate from college who now runs Citibank. He's a CEO, Michael Corbett. And we talk, and he talks about the fact that this is a longer term problem. They've also increased their reserves for bad debt, and they're looking for major issues on loan repayments. So again, we're not going to solve this problem soon. What we need to do is be more circumspect in our spending. And I think we need to stimulate growth as a key element to try to claw our way out of this deficit. I do have a solution, Patrick. I want to share it with you and your students. Think about this. You may feel that Congress is detached from the American people, that you don't have a voice. I believe that's right. I don't think we do have a voice. I think the cycle of re-election every 2 years makes Congress people who are career politicians focus on re-election and not on solving problems. They have no term limits. I believe we ought to have term limits. Make it 3 or 4 terms, 6 to 8 years. As a business person, you can get stuff done. As a legislator, you can get stuff done. But then let's refresh that group. Number 2 is, let's try to bring Congress out of Washington. Let's try to put them into the communities and have real congressional sessions in Austin, in Oakland, literally in arenas where people can see them interact, to debate publicly. And then, much like a sports event, have post-game interviews, post-debates on discussions like we do on some of the presidential debates. So I think there's reason to believe that we can solve our problems, but it's all about productivity. I'm a technology guy. I believe very strongly in productivity, drive revenue base, erase the deficit.
I do appreciate the approach towards long-term solutions. Whenever I see a politician say they're going to get everything done in 2 years, I'm always skeptical, because there are no problems that can just get done in a 1-2 year term. Almost no problems.
Patrick, I consider myself a moderate independent Republican. Now, isn't that a funny combination? I'm fiscally conservative. I'm culturally moderate. My point is, I've run businesses in 6 different countries. I lived in China. I ran a company for 3 years in China, right? So I have a global perspective. And I've also started up businesses in tech. God, so many opportunities. But I do recall at one point, years ago, early in my career, I pitched Sequoia Ventures, probably one of the preeminent venture capital firms in Sand Hill Road. They've done Yahoo, they've Google, major companies. And the chief managing partner there, a fellow named Don Valentine, a senior guy compared to me, I was in my mid-30s, said to me, Jim, there are 5 reasons for success. So this is something that you and your listeners may be interested in. I certainly was, and I still remember it to this day. The first reason for success is focus. The second reason is focus. The third is focus. The fourth is focus, and you can guess what the 5th one is, right?
I saw it on KUSI, yes.
Yeah, and this is an issue for our Congress people with this 2-year cycle. With this everlasting career politician track where they get on it early and they want to get reelected, and that's the focus. They're not focused on solving problems. We have issues here in the 52nd District and in our county, and our congressional delegation is invisible. Listen, it's hard to name them. Go ahead.
Speaking of those issues, I wanted to ask you another question related to your views on economic policy. You also stated on your website that you're going to, quote, enact legal requirements forcing both parties to shape up, end quote. What exactly does this entail?
Well, I think there are rules and processes. That's what I'm talking about. First of all, Congress has voted themselves wonderful benefits, unrealistic benefits compared to the average American. a healthcare program, which is golden, right? Which is expensive for our taxpayers, but more importantly, it doesn't reinforce what we try to achieve. We have passed the Affordable Care Act. It is law. And despite efforts to reverse that, it has not been reversed. And those benefits are good, but they are certainly nowhere near what Congress is receiving. I think Congress should receive what the people receive as their everlasting benefit. So I suggest that they are given VA benefits. Now think about that. Veterans Administration has been criticized for poor performance, for lack of consistency, for long wait times, damaging to the healthcare of our veterans who've served their country. I suggest we put Congress on that same program. Let them give them the VA program. And I bet you within
a bipartisan issue.
I tell you what,
both parties can agree about our veterans.
Patrick, that VA will be the best in the world if Congress is forced to focus on that. Number two is on the budget problem, constantly kicking the can down the road. During the last 8 years, during my opponent's tenure, 8 years, 9 times the debt ceiling has been raised. 9 times. So again, well, we'll make an exception this time. I propose that you have to approve a balanced budget, or you either lose your benefits until such time you do pass a balanced budget. And in the meantime, so there's no shutdown, it reverts back to the prior year's budget. Okay, we just can't shut it down. Before, when we did, we had the US Coast Guard not getting paid. It's ridiculous. So Congress needs to clean up their house because it's the people's house.
Speaking of debt, I want to move on to an issue that's very impactful to a lot of our listeners and a lot of students like me about student loan debt. So last year, NBC7 Investigates postulated that based on data from the National Student Loan Average, over 400,000 San Diegans likely still have student loan debt. What is your plan to ease the burden of already existing student loan debt in your district?
Yeah, I have got 2 comments on that. First, because of this very generous loan program, we've seen tuitions skyrocket because money was flowing into the university systems around the country, both public and private. And we've seen massive building efforts and massive growth in the universities, but most importantly, tuition increases that are well above the cost of living average, which I think is sinful. And of course, the chancellors will tell you, well, the buildings are privately financed. What they don't tell you is that they need to be maintained. That's out of their pockets. Number 2 is they need to be filled with professors. That comes out of their pockets. And number 3 is they need to get students who can pay top dollar, meaning we have 1 million foreign students in the US. I'm not against foreign students, but as we look at the issues of our country today, the deficit of education, how we have fallen behind. We're 25 out of 72 in science. We're 38 out of 72 in math. Our reading skills are 24 out of 72 of the top countries that are developed worldwide. This is untenable. So
are you suggesting
we're spending more.
Too many foreign students? What are you trying to propose?
I'm suggesting that we need to make available spots for our domestic students, right? And if we need to save those spots in our UC system for our local students, we should do that. That's the promise of being a California citizen, as one example, or even at SDSU, right? Or at other universities that are private, like USD. We need to educate our people and make them able to compete in the 21st century. So that's my first statement. So I'm happy to have international students. That adds to the fabric of our education, but not necessarily what we want is also to support our local students. One way we've tried to do that is through these loan programs. The loan is a loan. It's a fiduciary duty on the student's part and of the provider to fully disclose the implications, the payback rate. What's happening now is that these loans are large and have gotten a lot larger to afford these increased costs. And as a result, because of the student curriculum, students aren't equipped to get jobs in the growth industries, healthcare and technology and some of the other growth industries. So I'm afraid there's a disconnect between the educational standards and the bar that we have set and the students' expectations of what they can gain from a college education. So
So do you think the government should expand its efforts to help people pay for higher education?
I think the government should not expand efforts to help people pay for education. I think the government should help people pay back their obligations, and that could be extended terms or deferments. But I think it is an obligation, and that's the way the world works. Mortgages that you'll be signing up for, you're going to have to sign up, or if you don't pay back, you lose your mortgage, you lose your home, you lose your car if it's on a loan. I think we need to be much smarter consumers of that information. Now, obviously the draconian amount on individuals, they've overspent, they're burdened with credit issues. I think there's ways to have workout plans where payments can be deferred or spread out in a longer period of time. But to simply wipe out that debt, I think is unrealistic. It's not a part of our system. And I think, again, it's a populist move by some of the people on the left to appeal for voters, but it's unrealistic for America. On one hand, we have a deficit. On the other hand, we want to give away more and more and more. We only go further in deficit.
All right, I appreciate that. What are your thoughts on a national service plan to where a person can, say, serve a year in the military and get a 4-year scholarship, or do some sort of service and get years in college paid for? Would you be in support of a plan like that?
Totally supportive of that. Of course, we have that with the ROTC and the Conservation Corps. We even have, I think, part of that through the peace program, right? That we have that people have signed up for. So I would like to see that expanded if that's a means and an avenue for students and hardworking Americans to get their education. I would also
support a mandatory national service plan?
No, I don't know if mandatory works. Anything through coercion to me is government by fiat. I think we need to have not government by fiat, right? We need to have people's voice. Now, I've seen that work in Singapore, a more monoculture environment. I've seen it work in Taiwan. But in America, with our diversity, I don't think we should enforce a mandatory public service. We should encourage it. May I make another statement, Patrick, on education? That's a means to education. I like the trade-off and the quid pro quo on that. But what about school vouchers, school choice? I really believe, honestly, that we need more competition in our education system. And I believe that through our public education, as good as it is, we are falling behind. We need to reinvigorate that. How do you do that in our society? Through competition. Charter schools is one means of competition. And to me, that's wonderful. Opportunity Success is a scholarship program that's in Washington, D.C. Recently, that's been refunded, a good investment, because those schools actually graduate 98%, most of whom are Black and Hispanic, compared to the rates in public schools, which are less than 70% of graduation rates. And by the way, a large percentage go on to college. So I like those programs a lot. And the last thing I like are vocational training, similar to what the UK does, where you're tracked into certain vocations. Not everyone is cut out for college. And frankly, as far as I'm concerned, not everyone needs to go to college to get a good, solid paying, productive job that is satisfying to their lives.
Absolutely. All right, I really appreciate your answers on that. My listeners are really going to appreciate hearing your views on education as fiscal conservative. I want to move on to homelessness. So before the pandemic hit, I've been around San Diego talking with voters, as I'm sure you have as well.
Yeah.
And the main issue I consistently hear people voice their concern about is homelessness.
Yeah.
What do you think the role of government should be in ending the homelessness crisis? And how will Congressman DeBello reduce the population of homeless here in the 52nd District?
Yeah, it is an issue. As a national and federal employee, I believe they should be as engaged as the local officials are. I've been attending a symposium that's held quarterly at USD, bringing together private enterprise, citizens, and public officials, all of whom are working on it. I asked a very simple question in one of these sessions. I said, first of all, how much are we spending on the homeless problem in San Diego County? And we had all county city officials there. And no one had an answer. And back of the envelope, somewhere on the order of 300 million was sort of the number. 200 million from the county, 100 million from the city of San Diego, and God knows there's other agencies and private efforts. So on the order of 300 million, maybe 350 seems about right. Not to mention other state expenditures or federal expenditures, but some of those are blended in. Secondly, I said, well, how many homeless do we have? Is there a census? And there is no consensus. In this day of big data, in this day of smartphones, we still don't know how many homeless we have, okay? Estimates range from 10,000 people to 30,000. Of course, there's an ebb and a flow, and I get that. But if it's take 300 million divided by 10,000 people, that's $30,000 $30,000 a head. Okay, number one. So if you go on and take the logic further, it's what is the manifestation? What is the genesis of homelessness? And a large degree, again, the ranges are 60% to 80%, are due to either mental instability, mental health issues that aren't being addressed, or B, substance abuse. So let's just say it's 80%. Now, there's 20%, obviously, who have an economic hardship, a sudden dysfunction in their lives, and there are avenues for them to get back on their feet. There are public service programs that have been helpful for those who want help. My thought is we need to provide a helping hand, not a handout. All the handouts that we provide aren't taking people off the street. My business, my tech, we moved downtown. We literally had to walk over needles that had been used, or feces, or of course the smell of urine, to get to public locations to have a lunch or a company event outside the building. We were right across from a center that the city had to help people, but nonetheless, it's tragic that this is happening in America. 25% of homeless in the country are in California, and you haven't even talked about LA or San Francisco. It's even worse than it is in San Diego. Okay, so we have to rebuild our mental health infrastructure. That's what we have to do, and provide those services for rehabilitation. We have something very interesting in San Diego called the 3-day stand down. It's an intervention program for veterans. It's held in Balboa Park. Free services, everything from haircuts to drug rehabilitation advice and pathing, getting that path to rehabilitation. We have to rebuild that. We decimated that in the last 30 years in America, and that's where the weakness is. We will never completely solve all the homelessness issues. I've been at this when I worked for the county government in 1980, was involved in social welfare programs. I worked for the Department of Agriculture in the food and nutrition program. So unfortunately, there are people who do need help, who are sick, who need to be treated with care constantly. So it's just not a matter of putting up a modular house, although getting off the street is a good first step. It's really to wrap the services around that, but we need to fund that. That's where the federal government can come in and help.
Okay, so you believe that we should increase funding for mental health services that can help some of our homeless population?
Yeah, we really need to do that. We have to do that. Now, how do you reconcile that with a deficit? You have to obviously look hard at other programs and figure out where you can make adjustments. And obviously, as I'm a big believer in the 21st century and the opportunities that lie ahead of your generation on technology innovation, new businesses that you haven't even thought about, or me, that will be created, that will generate more productivity and greater growth. That's how we're going to work our way out of this problem.
Speaking of my generation, as well as future generations to come, I have one more question for you. So you don't support the Green New Deal, you said that on multiple occasions, but
Yeah.
Would you consider working with Democrats in Congress to create a plan to combat climate change that you view as more realistic? And if so, what would such a plan entail?
Yeah, I'm already doing that. And I'm proud to say that mobile check deposit has reduced carbon emissions by nearly an estimated 11 million tons. Now think about that. I've created a product that doesn't require people to get into their cars to go to the bank. That's basically the genesis of it. That's technology at its best. So as opposed to making speeches in Madrid like my opponent does, hopping on a 747 and burning all that fuel, speechifying isn't going to get us there. It's through technology innovation. So again, I go back to my primary theme: competition, fair markets, and investment in technology to work our way out of this climate issue that we have. So I do believe we all want clean air. We all want clean water, and we certainly want sustainable and renewable energy, right? And so we've made progress moving away from coal. We've stopped coal plant development, but the Chinese are building nearly 300 coal plants, by the way. So, any kind of international accords really have no teeth. We need to take and put our house in order and hopefully lead by example. So I'm willing to do that.
You are willing to get rid of coal over time, switching to renewable energy?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, think of natural gas. I mean, that's a step in the right direction. And then obviously from there on, we have solar and we have wind, but that's not our solution. That produces, 15, 20, even 30%, but you can't store it, right? So you need a constant source of energy. And so there are new technologies that are being investigated and invested by private enterprise to take next generation technologies to create clean and renewable energy. And I'm totally supportive of that. And I think we need to do that. Let me add the whole idea of plastics renewable. I feel very strongly about plastics being out of control. We packaged up plastics. We have a blue bin that we dump all our recyclables in, and then we think, hey, great, we're doing our part for the environment, when in fact, those get packaged up, shipped to China formerly. They would take what they needed, 10% of it, and then dump the rest, burn it, or send it to Indonesia. That plastic doesn't get recycled, right? We're not really effectively recycling in the world, and we need to have alternative types of products based on organic materials that would be good for packaging. I looked at the straws. And the straws, it's just a drop in the bucket. We got rid of the paper straws, right? The plastic straws. And then we moved to paper. People hated the paper. But then technology innovators say, you know what? We can use avocado seeds, crush them, use the fibers, create a straw which has good tactile feel in your lips, and not get crushed when you suck in your milkshake, and actually work. I thought, wow, what a great idea. Again, technology, innovation, your generation investing in the future. And that's what I believe in.
So you're not against small incremental improvements such as improving technology for straws, even if it's single-handedly not going to reduce carbon emissions by a significant amount, you'd be behind looking into new technologies like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I look into all sorts of technology. I think it has to be an all-encompassing view with regard to lots of different technologies and products that actually take away from the carbon footprint. Interesting article. You guys ought to read this, a book coming out shortly, Apocalypse Never. Apocalypse Never. For your listeners and for you, Patrick. Written by a guy, Michael Schellenberger. Michael is a UN IPCC expert reviewer. That's the International Organization for Climate. And he calls himself a Berkeley born and bred climate activist. All right. So certainly not a shill for the conservative movement. He clearly right in the middle of the climate discussion. And this is what he has to say. And you ought to listen to this. It's interesting. He says, basically, we have to stop the panic. The misuse of the word existential threat is creating great anxiety and fear among the next generation, not you guys, the one behind you.
Isn't some degree of fear warranted in this situation?
No, I think it's fear, and fear turns into panic. And panic turns into bad decisions, and bad decisions result in Green New Deal. And Green New Deal is a step backwards. Is going back to the horse and buggy. It's a all-comprehensive progressive agenda that doesn't work. Let's take it incrementally. Let's work aggressively at it, but let's look for the big hits. I think honestly we're seeing a lot more discussion about fusion, which is interesting. We have one of the leading companies in fusion here in the U.S. in San Diego County at General Atomics. Very clean energy, right? It's the energy of the sun, not yet harnessed. But totally renewable, right? Experiments going on in Europe with the EU at ITER. This is the stuff of science the stuff of advancement, the stuff that requires us to invest in STEM education for the next generation to be a leader globally and to be, as a free country, a leader for doing the right thing.
All right. Jim DeBello, candidate for California's 52nd. Thank you so much for sitting down with me. I appreciate the conversation we had. Good luck in November.
Thank you, Patrick. Really interesting questions. Well done. Thank you.